Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel called Zuzanareacts, where I learn all things Bharat with your help, and I just share my Slovak Central European point of view. And today concludes a part 2 of the Nilesh Oak's podcast on the Ranveer show about ancient history. So I'm just going to continue where we left off, but before we do,
please like this video and click on the subscribe button and turn on the notification. Thank you so much for your support.
I said let's continue.
Based on their younger guys' experience. So there were people who could do it.
Okay, couple of questions.
Yeah.
One, I'm an engineer. I know how computers work. I know how the universe works in terms of, they say that mathematics is the language of the universe. So even astronomy, it seems to me that when you're talking about angles of the earth, rotation, revolution, all that, it's basically mathematics.
Yes.
So if you fill all this mathematics into a computer program, won't the computer software be able to simulate the past in great detail?
Yes.
I'm assuming that that's the case. So then why do we need research to be done on when Saturn and Mars enters a particular?
Okay, great point. It does it, but just like if you dig, there are archaeological objects down there and they have a date in them. There is a carbon organic matter in them, but somebody has to dig them. Somebody has to take it out, take it to the lab,
Gotcha.
Mass spectrometry, spectroscopy. It's something similar. So the data exists. See, the NASA jet propulsion data on the astronomy exist. But in order for someone to go and look at it, that person should know Surya Siddhanta. That person should know these verses. That person should understand the meaning of it. That person should have a conviction that this is a factual narration of some time, and then would be willing to work for many years with no guarantee of success and no monetary benefit, very likely, spend money from your own pocket to figure out something. And somebody says, okay, so Saturn split the card of Rohini. So what? How does that benefit me today?
Dear ISRO. That's all I have to say. Okay, end of that particular tangent.
Yeah.
The other question I have for you is, when is the next point that Saturn and Mars are going to split the cart of Rohini?
We don't know. It will, because it's a combination of many complex phenomenon that needs to occur. But let me quickly complete that in the sense, beyond that 8000 BC, there is a 12,000 BC epoch,
right,
which matches with Ramayana. What Surya Siddhanta says is that there were time when there were two pole stars in the sense, one in the north, one in the south, very bright. And anyone standing at the equator, like Singapore, so to say, looking in both directions, they would see these pole stars at the horizon.
Wow.
Now, in that chapter number 12 of Surya Siddhanta, it says two additional phenomena. Just to manage time, I will not go into the deep details. One of them is, again, the obliquity has become 24. It was in 3000 BC, but if you go back in 12,000 BC, again it's 24. Do you know why? Because it's 24, it hit 24 in 12,000 BC, then went to 24.5 and came back to 24. That's why this 3000. So that's another evidence. And the third evidence is something more complicated. I presented on it at Oxford conference and they were totally lost. They had no idea. So I will not do that right now. But you can take this on a Shraddha. Those three phenomena all come together and blurt out 12,000 BC. And our paper is out there, Rupa Bhati and myself. The paper is, a published paper is out there. Presentation is out there. My point is, that is also there in Surya Siddhanta. Now, what's the importance to Ramayana? Ramayana 12,209. Guess what? Here, two bright stars are given as a pole stars. Now, when does that happen? Something happened in 3000 BC, but also happened again in 12,000 BC. Guess what? Ramayana describes the pole star of Ramayana times. That is not the pole star we have today, because see, Earth axis is pointing somewhere. When it changes, the pole star changes. Okay, and Ramayana says in such a clear, beautiful language, no ifs, no buts. Brahma Rashir Vishuddhasya Shuddhasya Paramarshya Archishmantah Prakashante Dhruvam Sarve Pradakshinam. The Saptarshis are rotating around the Dhruva star, which is Brahma Rashi. Brahma Rashi is a Abhijit, is a Vega in modern astronomy. Same time, when this Sugriv is going in the southern direction, again, just like east direction we talked about, southern direction, he's giving directions to Vanara party. He's saying, how far you are going? Okay, go to the southern tip of India. Now, to describe where that southern tip of India is, of course, they will see the ocean anyways. He says, go to the southern tip, then climb the Mount Mahendra, and then you will able to see star Agastya. Now, somebody who doesn't know astronomy says, what about it? But today, we can see star Agastya even from New Delhi. But during the Ramayana times, you could see star Agastya only if you go to the southern tip, like Kanyakumari, then climb Mount Mahendra. There is a Mount Mahendra. Then only you can see it. And the reason you could only see after doing all of this, because Canopus or Agastya had become a pole star in the south. So you see the Ramayana description, you take the Surya Siddhanta. Surya Siddhanta says 12,000 BC. Ramayana evidence says 12,000 BC. Bingo.
Okay.
So the nakshatra at that point, which was over South India, today lies over New Delhi.
No, not quite that. So Agastya is still further south. But what happens is, because of this precession and because of their movement, Agastya says what's happening is this. Like, think of the crankshaft motion in a car. Like, the piston is going back and forth, right? But that turns into a cyclical motion. So think of the Earth's motion here as a cyclical motion like this. But that turns into, for a person in, say, Mumbai or New Delhi, when can I see Agastya? So if New Delhi person is standing there for 15,000 years, he will say, I see Agastya there. I don't see Agastya now. Okay, I don't see Agastya. 4,000 years go by. I don't see Agastya. Another 4,000 years go by. Oh, I see Agastya. And it's slowly coming up. So something that's a circular, for a person on the ground with respect to specific star, it's going to become back and forth motion.
Okay. Gotcha. Wow, you explained some deep level of astronomy. How deep have you gone into astronomy in your studies?
I would say not enough. See, what happens is, this is true. Newton has said it. Like, when people were fascinated with Newton, and they asked him, so you must be feeling great. And he said, no, I feel like I have found maybe a pieces of sand from the whole beaches, whole beach right in front of me. It's like that. More you know, Upanishad talks about it. More you know, you realize how little you know.
True. That's been my journey over the course of the show also.
Absolutely.
At every point, every 50 episodes, I think there's no more content left. And I'm humbled more at every 50 episodes.
Same here.
Same here. What I want to ask you about is the 34,000 year mark. You mentioned that outside.
Yes.
So effectively what you're saying is Surya Siddhanta was written 34,000 years ago. That's as far back as it goes.
Surya Siddhanta would actually go a lot older. Okay, at least some portions of it. No, the 34,000 years event that I refer to, 34,000 BC, we will call it 34,000, 34K BC. This is and this is, by the way, let me give the credit where it is due. My co-researcher, Rupa Bhati, fascinating researcher, fascinating. By the way, I translated for her. We have a humor going on. She says, when I tell these people nobody understands. That's because she thinks at a very different level. It's difficult.
You mean in terms of astronomy?
Yeah, she I mean, you and me can do an episode on Rupa Bhati's research. It is that fascinating and that deep. But just this 34,000. So she found a reference in Maitrayani Upanishad or Maitrayani Aranyak, another Upanishad, where there is a king, Bruhadrath. And the king's Ikshwaku dynasty, the same dynasty as Bhagwan Ram. So the kings in his dynasty are mentioned, but remember, Bhagwan Ram is not mentioned. Now, what does that tell you? Bhagwan Ram is so important in the Ikshwaku dynasty. So if there was a discussion of Ikshwaku dynasty and some king after Bhagwan Ram, very likely Bhagwan Ram would have been mentioned. But that's not evidence we need to look at. But he's not mentioned. So this is way before that. That much we know. What he's talking of some astronomy phenomenon. I'll tell you two. He says the pole star is moving. I'll come back and explain why he's saying that. Another thing he says is that the spring equinox is in the Magha nakshatra. So that tells you when to nail it down. And something interesting. Now, this is astronomy. But then he says something on the ground. He says the oceans are drying up. It's a scary feeling. Oceans are drying up, meaning the water levels are going down.
An ice age is beginning.
Yeah. Now, we know last 20,000 years, they are not drying up. Meaning this incident, just from a terrestrial point of view, this must be before 20,000. That's a very powerful evidence. Now we have to bring three things together. Oceans drying up, spring equinox in the Magha nakshatra, and the pole star moving. The pole star is always moving. But in 38,000 BCE, again, we had the same situation like we had in 12,000 BCE. Like Brahma Rashi at the pole star here and pole star here. Okay, so that was existing in 38,000 BC. So that moving, so 4,000 years they have seen the movement. Pole star is going away. Brahma Rashi is going away. That's what Bruhadrath has seen. He's seeing oceans drying up like that. And the spring equinox in Magha. Now, from our time, if you want to go back in antiquity, when was the last time spring equinox was in Magha? It was 8,000 BC. But that time oceans level coming up and they were not going down. Okay, so we have to go to another 26,000 year cycle. That takes us to 34,000 BC. And now, if you Bruhadrath is in 34,000 BC, and there are many kings like Sagar and many others are mentioned, which means their time is even before that. Keep in mind, as we go back in antiquity, the physical evidence or even astronomy evidence is going to get less and less.
Yeah.
That's just the nature of it.
Physical evidence is the evidence that modern day archaeologists count as the ultimate kind of evidence.
Correct.
But the truth is physical evidence fades away. It erodes just because of how nature works, because of how time works.
Correct. And it overlaps, right? It overlaps on each other.
Yeah.
Like there was a house before, it was destroyed and built a new house. The evidence of old house is almost gone.
I just want to quickly mention something not related to
Yeah.
India, which is that I remember Graham Hancock doing an episode with Joe Rogan about ancient Egypt, I believe. He
Yeah.
said that the Egyptians that we talk about in the Egyptian civilization, which is also supposed to be at the same time as the Indus Valley civilization that we read about in school, those Egyptians counted themselves as the modern day Egyptians, and they believed that there was a much more ancient race of Egyptians dated back to almost 80,000 BC.
I have looked at that research myself and I agree with it. In fact, they talk of these 3 cycles of these 26,000 years. That is 75,000 years right there, 80,000 years.
Yeah. I can sense so many archaeologists getting pissed off with this conversation, and I'm enjoying it. Because how else are you supposed to explore ancient human history? There is no way that digging will be able to give you any evidence.
Well, just because you raised the point, let me give you the evidence you can find from dirt archaeology right here in India. How's that? Going back to 70,000 years. Toba explosion. Have you heard this? Okay. Sumatra, like the Indonesian, Indonesian island, volcano, the Aceh Banda, that area, the volcano came and it spouted ash all over India, but even the bigger area, Arabian Sea, the evidence can be found everywhere. But if you go to India everywhere, but Jwalapuram, which is in Kurnool district of Andhra Pradesh, you see, and other places too, but you see actually, this is very interesting, stone tools first as you dig, then you see a ash layer, thick ash layer, referring to that Toba explosion. You can date it to 72,000 years ago. And below that, stone tools, which means there were people before using it. There were people after who survived, and it was continuing.
Damn. So within the Earth's crust lies the Earth's story.
Yeah. I wrote 3 books. My 4th book I'm working on is just a simple working title is History of Hindu Civilization.
Wow.
And I'm going to call it Brief History of Hindu Civilization, and essentially going to cover 75,000 years of Indian civilization.
Wow. So cool.
Okay. So I'm very proud of Hinduism. I'm very proud of India. I'm very proud of this subcontinental land and our culture.
Yeah.
I just think over the course of doing the show with skeptics as well, the one thing I've learned is that one key aspect was the Zoroastrian religion, which I truly believe was a sister religion. I remember doing an episode on Islam with an Islamic scholar, and he spoke about how even Islam was formed due to the religions that existed before Islam. And those religions were probably an outcome of earlier religions as well.
Correct.
Now, these earlier set of religions are called the classical religions, and they say that only Zoroastrianism and Hinduism are the 2 classical religions which have survived. So, while I love the fact that we've survived, I think our time spent in survival has allowed us to create astronomy and shlokas and all these things.
Agriculture, navigation.
Everything that we attribute to the greatness of ancient India, it's an outcome of us having survived.
Yes.
I also feel that perhaps Zoroastrianism also is quite advanced, like in terms of it knows a lot. And I have a very close friend of mine, Zarwan Bancha, he's a Parsi, and he keeps making fun of the fact that, oh, we are Parsis, we're going extinct. He says it as a joke, but the unfortunate truth is that Parsi numbers are dwindling.
Yes.
So even Zoroastrianism, it seems like, I don't like saying this, and I know that Parsis watching this, Parsis are very relaxed people.
Yes.
So they don't get easily offended, I've noticed this. But it seems like the timeline of that religion also may be coming to an end just because of the dwindling numbers.
Correct.
Now, that's just the story of Zoroastrianism. How many other classical religions were there which actually came to an end?
Yeah.
Which brings me to the point of that migration out of Africa. I get that we, as a human species, settled in India and then migrated outwards. And there's genetic studies that prove this when you study patrilineal lineage and matrilineal lineage. But my question is, why didn't humans settle in the Gulf as well?
Okay.
Because the Gulf is midway between Africa and India.
Correct.
So were the conditions in the Gulf bad? Or
good point. Well, right now you look at the conditions, you know the answer, you know your answer. Other than say parts of Oman. Oman is a beautiful place, very, picturesque also. But even then, within the Gulf context, it is picturesque, it's a tough land still. So today, if the oil is not there and the external commerce doesn't exist, it's a very tough life in the Middle East, just by itself. So similar conditions did exist there for a long time, also in the Northern Africa. And so therefore, they did not live there. But if you look at the genetic makeup, you will find there were many times in the history of humanity that the Gulf was a thriving community. For example, especially the area near Israel, Jordan, Syria, that area. For example, if you ask academic, when did agriculture begin? You will get a very ignorant answer that came from a Cambridge University 7,000 years ago into the Levant, that area. And from there it moved out. Well, Levant did have agriculture. I'm so surprised that evidence, a very fabulous evidence exists for 100 years. A very sophisticated evidence showing that there was a well-developed agriculture in Levant, especially Syria, Jordan, Israel, that area, going back to 15,000 plus years. I have the information. I don't know what academics do.
You mean they found tools?
The grains, they are called phytoliths. The grains also become fossilized.
Oh, okay.
And you can look at them to decide whether they were wild grains or basically cultivated grains and so on and so forth. Very fascinating. Same thing in India. Just because we are agriculture, let me mention. Everyone says, oh, so agriculture came to India from Levant. Nonsense. That's the only word. In the Indian subcontinent, there is a evidence. See, this is a land where if you don't do anything, still things grow. Okay. And for a very long time, million plus years, that is the situation in India. There is at least evidence going back to 45,000 years of a wild harvesting of grains, their storage, their cooking, their siphoning and all of this. 45,000 years ago.
In India.
In India, Africa, actually Sri Lanka, in Sri Lanka. And then in India, going back to 10,000 years, 12,000 years, very good agriculture.
But do you agree with the fact that human beings originated in Africa?
That is the current theory. There is, based on the evidence, there is a good reason to believe that, like L, the L initially, the Lucy, that's why the L, that the oldest thing that the fossil they found and so on. Not oldest anymore, but still. But the genetic trail does tell you that it started from Africa and came here. However, there is more and more evidence popping up all over the world. One of my good friend and my adopted Canadian mom, Ushi Ringlep, she's a German Canadian, has done fascinating research on the connection of Polynesian languages with Sanskrit, coming from Sanskrit. That's a sidebar. She has done this research too. I am doing this research. Many others are doing it. That very likely there were many pockets of human origin. Just like different animals, similar looking animals can pop up in different places, very much like that. There is, but even if we keep that aside, maybe we have to wait for some time. There is a recent paper, 2020 paper. The paper title goes something like this: Homo erectus left Africa, returned as Homo sapiens sapiens, like as a thinking human. And do you know where they became thinking human? Take a guess. India. The broader India. When we say India of the past, like going back beyond 2,000 years, 4,000 years, it's very important the Indians understand it. The Iran is India. Afghanistan is India. Pakistan is India. Even the Uttara Kuru, Uttara Madra, that is India. India in the sense of cultural landscape.
Okay. So effectively what you're saying is our predecessor, which was not entirely human, some form of a cave
Or Homo erectus, yeah.
Homo erectus actually was migratory.
Yeah.
And it gradually spread itself out of Africa,
correct,
out of Asia, and then in Iran, stretch it up to India.
Yes.
As well as in Central Asia, stretch it up to Lanka.
Yeah, that's India.
Yeah.
That's ancient India. That became a genetic cuisine for human beings. Lots of different, ranges came, and that's how they are named right now. So, for example, when you see R, that is for Rohini. That's how the name is given. M from the southern India, like the female gene, chromosomal mitochondrial gene, is called Manju. That's how the names are given. N is Nasreen, now referring to the Middle East.
You'll have to give a bit of genetics 101 here. I get what, no, we can do it now.
Okay.
I think it's actually linked. This is how you deep dive into the science of this theory.
Right. So imagine.
So I'm going to stop it right here because I'm just thinking like, well, if it came from Africa and went to India, well, you have to mix with someone. So I'm very curious what he's about to say, essentially, because I don't know how everyone, I know that I also have spiritual crowd and stuff, but I'm quite interested in galactic history. And from that point of view, at least based off of, and I mentioned that his name a couple of times, Matthias Di Stefano, and, in the part when we talked about Atlantis, and he basically says that he remembers his lives when he lived in Atlantis, and he talks a lot about Atlantean culture, etc. But he has a series on Gaia TV about the evolution in the history of the universe, and it's an interesting thing. I mean, I'm sure there are people that would try to discredit him and all that kind of stuff, but I mean, you'd have to be exceptionally clever to make all of these things up and try to, talk about it the way he talks about it. And I saw also a video trying to discredit him, and then in the comments where I read, there were people that went to things that he has done because he claims himself being a portal, but they said that it was crazy when they were part of, let's say, his group and the work he was doing. And I just feel like it's the way he talks about it, depth he talks about it, everything makes sense. Everything isn't as in it relates. You'd have to be, I don't know. I don't even think it's possible for a single person to make it up. So if any of you are interested in galactic history, I would recommend him. And he talks about Anunnakis and how our DNA, how we are not really of this planet, and how we are mixed with extraterrestrial beings. So I wonder, obviously we will now learn a bit more about genetics from Nilesh, but I do personally believe that there is more to the story than obviously we are seeing. We don't know, but well, we might try and uncover and discover as much as we want. But I think, even right now, imagine right now, it's just so hard to understand things within context. So how do you want to truly understand something millions of years ago without pretty much kind of any context? You'd have to understand how people think, what they do, etc. It's quite of a complex topic, but let's go back to the video.
In a very simple way, think of our cricket ball. Like in India, everyone understands cricket,
Sure.
right? So we take a cricket ball and just imagine we put some patch on it, like some specific patch, blue patch. Now, because this cricket ball is dead, but with the human beings, like they produce children, they're going to produce the children with a blue patch on them, so to say. That is the change that has occurred to the gene. Okay. And if we track it, we know we can track it back to which genetic tree we came from. That's how these names are. So certain genetic code that you can match and saying, hey, this is consistent, we call this Manju. But if we call it Manju, if it's an X chromosome, like the female chromosome, so to say. If it's on the Y chromosomes, they have given different names, like the male's name to it, so forth, M17 and so on and so forth. If you look at that, you essentially find, and this is a paper from 2020. I mean, you go to Google Map, you're going to find things came from Africa through Gulf, Middle East, but then from India, just like, you see the airline map from Delhi and Mumbai, like planes going everywhere. You're going to see all these lines, the mitro, the female, the mother's lines, as well as the mains line, like R gene, for example, R, going outside India.
Okay. One more.
Yeah, but to me, this still doesn't explain, like, if person originated from, they went to different parts, but in order to get different chromosomes, they would have to mix with different types of people, right? Like, I'm not saying I'm an expert and like, I really know nothing about genetics. But no, like it would presume, I guess, in my little head, that any of you who are any experts, please do educate me on this point. But it feels like, yes, you would have a certain group of like Homo whatever erectus, but if they came, they would just have the kind of same genetic code. And if you were to get a different genetic code, you have to mingle with others. So that would presume that you would have other people in, let's say, India, parts of what he talks about being an ancient India. Like, let me know. I'm confusing this one very much.
Angle on genetic studies, and this is picked up from Dr. Neeraj Rai. Yeah. Matrilineal lineage, I believe it's called. Right?
Matrilineal, which is a mitochondrial, is a matrilineal.
In terms of every girl and her mother and her mother and her mother and her mother, and you can go all the way back, shares something in common, one common link that is called matrilineal lineage, and that can be mapped in the genome, I believe.
Correct.
Similarly, there's patrilineal lineage. So you and me as men share something in common with our fathers, with their fathers, with his father, and it goes back.
Yes.
That's the basis of everything you're saying right now.
Correct.
When you're talking about these lines that leave India, I think what you're trying to say is that if you study modern day Europeans and modern day Indians, they share some common ancestor, which likely the Europeans would like to believe originated in Europe.
Yeah.
The Indians would like to believe it originated in India.
Correct. And the science tells you that most of them originated in India based on the age, the antiquity of that gene. So for example, I mean, I'll not go into technicality, but yes, so R exists in Europe, R exists in India. Now, who gave it to who? That is the question. So there is a way in genetics. It's not a perfect science yet. It's progressing tremendously. But based on this, you can say, like, where you find these older cricket balls with the older stamps. So if you find in India, but you don't find that older one in England. So you know that it started in India. It's something like that.
Gotcha.
Okay. But on that topic, I have something in mind. Let me share that with you. Just like we looked at beyond astronomy, multidisciplinary evidence, there is a genetic evidence, a fascinating genetic evidence for Mahabharata, showing that Mahabharata happened in 5561 BC.
Wow.
So that's what I wanted to share. So Surya Siddhanta, this evidence, and then one from paleontology for Ramayana. Now let me ask you a question. Let's see, and if you don't know the answer, that's perfectly fine. Mahabharata war happened for 18 days. In fact, Vyasadeva used that as 18 as a number, and you see it everywhere. 18 chapters of Bhagavad Gita, 18 Aukshohini battalions kind of thing fought, 11 on one side, 7 on another side. War lasted for 18 years. So, they put some magical numerology number into it. 18 parvas of Mahabharata. So 18 Aukshohini, have you heard that word? Like a battalion, the modern day.
Okay, I'm just going to stop real quick here. So it's interesting that he's talking about, because numbers are, Nikola Tesla had said a number 369 are the keys to the universe, that if you understand the 369s, you have the keys to the universe. And if you add 18, it adds that up to 9. I wonder, any of you, if you have any idea of this, and if there is any other significance of the 18, because numbers are usually in my head connected with some sort of ritual or practice, etc. Like, any knowledge, please do let me know in the comments. Let's continue.
think of it as a battalion. So there were 18 Aukshohini, that much worth of soldiers fought during the Mahabharata war. 11 on the Kaurava side, 7 on the Pandava side. If you look at the Mahabharata descriptions of what that Aukshani means, how many folks on horses and camels or whatever, and the elephants, the total number for 18 comes out equal to 4 million male. Most of the, 100% of the people who fought were men.
4 million.
4 million, 40 lakhs.
40 lakh people.
Okay. I want you to take this number, and in the engineering side, we are going to solve a lot of equations here. Equation number 1. So 40 million men fought for 18 days, and practically 99.99% of them died. That's what Mahabharata tells us. The estimated population, and they keep on re-estimating because of modern new tools, right? The number, when I did this about 5 years ago, the number is between 5 to 20 million for our total human population, okay, in 6 millennium BC. True or false? Let's not go there. It's not important. So for our exercise, I'm going to take it 20 million, the higher number. Now, in the Mahabharata, the people came from as far west as Syria.
Wow.
And as far east as Indonesia, or maybe not Indonesia, border of Indonesia, like Cambodia and something like this. Okay. And so yeah, that's the range. Okay. For example, the Bhagadatta, who fought during the Mahabharata war, came from Iraq, Baghdad. Okay. But that's another subject. Now, what I'm saying is this is a pretty decent area. And for simplicity, I'm going to say out of the 20 million, half of the people were affected by the Mahabharata war, meaning people came from this area. So 10 million people were affected. They all did not come. So if there are 10 million people who kind of related to the Mahabharata war, simple mathematics we can do is 10 million, in 10 million, 5 million would be women, 5 million would be men, a reasonable thing. Okay. Now the interesting part. Out of that 10 million or 5 million men, 4 million men were gone in 18 days. What are we left with? 1 million men and 5 million women. What is that ratio? Ratio is 5:1, right? So suddenly there is this Y chromosome, the male chromosome, the patriarchal chromosome bottleneck. Like suddenly a huge male population is gone. So now there are only 1 million men for 5 million women, so to say, for the further population. And so that bottleneck in the Y chromosomes is going to come out as a signature into the future population. Make sense? Okay. Now if we go here and type Monica Carmine, page 2015. You got that Monica researcher there. Yeah, 15. Okay. Now, yeah, stay with this paper. Yeah.
It's commonly thought that human genetic diversity in non-African populations was shaped primarily by an out-of-Africa dispersal 50 to 100,000 years ago. Here we present a study of 456 geographically diverse high-coverage Y chromosome sequences, which means basically men from different parts of the world.
Yeah, Y chromosome is men. Yeah.
Okay. Including 299 newly reported samples. Applying ancient DNA calibration, we date the Y chromosomal to most recent common ancestor in Africa at 254 and detect a cluster of major non-African founder haplogroups in a narrow time interval at 47,000 to 52,000 years ago. That's what I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Consistent with a rapid initial colonization model of Eurasia and Oceania after the out of Africa bottleneck. In contrast to demographic reconstructions based on empty DNA, we infer second strong bottleneck in Y chromosome lineages dating to the last 10,000 years. We hypothesize that this bottleneck is caused by cultural changes affecting variants of reproductive success among males.
The last line they say it because they don't know about Mahabharata.
So they are saying that something happened
in the reproductive
to guys.
They're explaining, right?
But it can't be possible that a bottleneck that happened only one other time in the last 50,000 years happened because so many men's penises stopped working. That's what they are trying to possibly say, but it doesn't make sense. Even they are saying that we don't know why this is happening.
So many penises stopped working because they were dead in 18 days. Okay, we are going to look at that. Don't read too much into the diagrams below, okay? But look at the colors, like the sort of a blue color is for India, and those dot, yellow is for Europe, if you notice. Okay, the sort of orange is like for what is that? Russian area, correct? And so on. So now, so that blue area that you're seeing is India, so to say. Okay, and you find that all of them, the yellow is Europe and so on and so forth. Okay, the light blue is the north, like Middle East and so on and so forth. The dark green below is East Asia, like east of India.
I think the dark green is South Asia.
Oh, South Asia, sorry. The blue is East Asia, right?
Right.
The blue. Okay, so follow those kind of. I mean, just stay there right now, and you see a sudden bottleneck, which is that fall. You see, okay,
in all of them.
No, it's in all of them. We'll see why. Actually, what you'll find is that the green fall, if you see the green happens before yellow.
Right.
Because the epicenter is India. And I'm going to give you a metaphor to explain that. Okay, can you go down and see there's another beautiful graph. I hope it is there. So look at South Asia. Okay, you see where South Asia is?
Yes.
See where the straight line starts going down. Compare that, they're exactly on the same scale. Go up to Europe and notice the bottom that Europe is later than South Asia. You see, it's happening later. Okay. By the way, the other graphs I showed, nobody participated in Mahabharata war from South America, from Oceania, like Polynesia, or the northern Russia. And if you look at their graphs, actually, you can see it right here too. They have no, for example, let's look at, say, Africa. Africa shows some. Maybe that is because of Ghatotkaч, you know. I'm just joking. But well, first look at the dark green line, which is South Asia, which is India. South Asia is a very bad word, you know, by the way. That is to deal with the inferiority complex of Pakistanis. Okay, that's why the word South Asia is used. It's a word. It's a global conspiracy.
As in
India. What South Asia they're talking?
Okay.
You know. Okay. So that India. Look at the first line. Truly, the one that really came to the bottom. The first line to deviate, come down. The deepest, the green line I'm following. And then if you follow, it stays longer at the bottom and almost the last one to recover. You see? That is, so it's like a Bhuj, you know, where we had the earthquake. That is
genetic
the last
bottleneck. Massive genetic bottleneck.
Bottleneck. And last one to come out. Okay.
Right.
Then follow quickly two. One is the Near East, which is Middle East. You see that orange kind of line? Just after green, it follows down and then goes straight up. Which is like, it had an effect like a Bhagadatta's army, let's say. But then it quickly recovered.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Then you look at the East Asia, that Southeast Asia. Which is to think of, you know, like Myanmar, you know, Thailand, Indonesia. So they also are affected, not as much as India, and also they recover. Now look at the yellow line. Here it is very easy to see Europe. See, whereas India is like, I mean, now you may ask the question, or skeptic should ask a question. I am saying the effect happened in 7,500 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So that is that point between 7 and 8. So somebody will say, and actually people do ask me, oh, but why the green line is already going down from 10? Okay, now this is a good question, but that immediately tells me the person doesn't know anything about mathematical modeling. If there are no data points, this initial, you know, where you see 12 and they have shown one constant point, that's the control group. They assume that everything is same, you know. Now from that, the first deviation data point may be found around 7.5 or 8. But how do you connect those points? Either you connect by straight line, concave, convex. That's why it is like that.
Because actually it's a steep fall.
It is a steep fall.
But on the graph, you can't show a steep fall.
Correct. Because they're doing modeling and they don't know Mahabharata. So they have no reason to wait for 5561 BC to bring it down. You know. So that's the point. So this is fabulous. So the epicenter is India. And keep on going down. You're going to find one
second. I just want to stay on this graph because I am also noticing what you said about Africa. Which has again a smaller dip, more gradual dip.
Correct.
I want to see what you're speaking about, the Andes, which is
nothing. You know, Andes. Look at Andes.
Nothing until roughly 2,000 years ago.
Yeah. Which is what?
When Europeans found it.
No, not 2,000 years ago. They found 500 years ago. But some other migrations happened within that. Whatever. You know, we don't know what happened, right?
My bad.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, it could be that same 10,000 versus 7,000 ka logic.
You said it. You said it. There is no data point.
And you can't show a steep fall, so it's a gradual.
Yeah. So what do they do, right?
So what is actually 500 years ago on the graph, you see it as 2,000 years ago.
Good point. Good point.
So Andes, again, the fall happens perhaps because of European invasion.
Yeah.
And which other Siberia, which is the pink line.
Yeah. Again goes like haywire.
Yeah. No connection to these falls.
See how consistent it is. And none of these guys, there is no conspiracy between these 92 genetic scientists and Nilesh Oak. Okay. So 4 million people gone. The 10 million people in the area where the Mahabharata war was affected, so to say, you know, which is what? India, Middle East, and further east of India. So think of those colors, the blue, the light blue, and a green. Okay. Now what happens? So 4 million people are gone. Therefore, now the ratio after the war is women to men, not the population, although I'm showing population, but the genetic diversity is 5:1. Okay. Now, little bit of tough science. Okay, stay with me. When nothing like that is happening, like a couple comes together to make a baby. A man has Y and X. Everyone follows. The lady has X and X. Every woman has 2X, right? So if you just take couples like that, what is the ratio of a variation in X chromosome to Y chromosomes?
There are 3 X's, 1 Y.
3:1. So that is my baseline. Now what happens is when you look at the ratio, and I will send you that graph. What the graph is going to show is when you look at the female diversity to male diversity, the ratio is around 3, which is how it should be. When it comes to a certain time, and that time, if you look at it, is by the way 7,500 years ago. It goes like a peak of 16:1. So 16 excess variation to 1 Y, which is to say, that is a absolute number. For relative number, we have to take 16 divided by 3. Are you following? Because 3 is my noise, signal to noise ratio. Okay. So 16 divided by 3 is what? 5 approximately. Now bring back to here. So out of 10 million, 4 millions are gone, men are gone. Now the ratio remaining is 5:1. Monica Carmine paper written in 2015, who knows nothing about the Mahabharata, they are saying there was a male gene bottleneck, Y chromosome bottleneck, in 7,500 years ago, 5561 BCE. I mean, they don't say 5561 BCE. The extent of that bottleneck was 16:1 on the absolute scale or 5:1 on a relative scale. 5:1 based on a population, 5:1 in their paper. One more thing. And what was the epicenter? Where was the impact of this the highest, the deepest? India. That is that green line. If you see that, there is another curve.
Is this the graph you wanted to show?
So yeah, here. See 16:1. Look at the y-axis. That NE ratio is like an absolute scale. The female diversity to male diversity. NF over NM. So that peak that you see, if you draw the line from that ultimate peak, it will come to 7,500.
Understood.
Look at how wonderful is that peak.
I wonder what happened on the previous peak, which is at 55,000
Yeah,
years ago.
Great. You asked, right? That will be another episode.
Perhaps another
My
one.
speculation is that is the Dasharadnya Yuddha described in the Rig Veda.
Of 10 kings.
10 kings.
The
That is
war
why
of the 10
Dasharadnya.
kings.
Yeah. But see, correct, 10 kings. But the information about the Dasharadnya Yuddha is so little that I tried to do it. We cannot do much
It's
with it.
too far back.
Too far back. No, too far is not a problem. My speculation was also like Parshurama getting rid of the wild Kshatriyas miscreants 21 times.
Damn.
Yeah, the male again,
Yeah, because you in Sanatan Dharma you don't kill off women.
Correct. Yes. And one more thing I want to show you. This is very interesting. Just stay there on this graph. No, stay on this graph. Look, after 80 and 70, between 80 and 70, see a fall in the other direction.
Yeah, as in there's more males at these points.
Yeah, correct. Like as if women died, right? Now there was a Toba explosion there. Okay, now we don't know again why men survived more and women died. Maybe men were always out there and survived. Everyone in the caves, women, making the chutneys,
Yeah, maybe the
and
caves...
all the ash went in and they died. This is all speculation. But that matches with the Toba explosion. It happens in the other direction. It's a perfect data for additional research. Yeah. So this graph, I can tell you. Remember, I said my brief history of Hindu civilization starts with 75,000 years. This graph is going there.
Okay, so I'll stop it right here. It is a fascinating one. I didn't want to stop it, but I feel like we are just so running over time with this part of the video. So fascinating, truly fascinating. I don't know how you guys are feeling about this, the whole genetic conversation. If you have any kind of answers for me about, I don't feel like I got that from the podcast, and maybe I'm just asking something super silly, but hey, I'm not a biology person here. I don't know much about it, so yeah, it feels still like if they migrated, they must have gotten, with different people. Strange one, and it's also like makes I wonder how it works, right? I know not much about it, but if you this is the bad thing, right? When you mingle within your own blood, that causes health issues and disabilities and degradation and all that kind of stuff. So I just wonder how the whole evolution actually happened, because if you have just one person, Lucy, she had to, also there has to be not just Lucy, but a male guy, right? And then to get something else from different regions, you'd have to have that originate there. I don't know. I'm super confused about that. So please let me know. What you guys know about the topic, and if you are able to clear any of my doubts, that would be super helpful. And with that being said, thank you so much for watching this video with me. If you did enjoy, please give a thumbs up, share, like, and subscribe to this channel, and I'll see you in a part 3 very soon. Until then, please do take care. I am sending lots of love. Bye-bye.